The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Friday, the 27th of February, 2026, and we're live here at CHD TV. We have, we have breaking news story for you this morning. We have Jenna and Heathe coming on in just a moment to talk about their win against the VICP. This is a tragic story, but it's a really important story. And then we're going to go to Doctors and Scientists with Brian Hooker, with David Rasnick. But so welcome to the show, Jen and Heath. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Well, first of all, just tell us both a bit about yourselves and then we'll get into the story.
I'm Jenna, and this was our first child.
Heath Heller.
Okay, so you're the parents of Heathe. So here, let's take us right back to before Heathe had these vaccines. Talk about the pregnancy, the birth. You talked a little bit about a liver enzyme issue. Talk us through that right up to where we are now. Just tell your story.
Okay. So we had a normal, healthy pregnancy. He was born at around 37 weeks, and he got the Hep B vaccine in the hospital, and the newborn screening came back with elevated liver enzymes. And so we went and they sent us for this testing for VLCAD at the geneticist at Cook's. And they just said, basically, wake him up every 2 hours. He could go in starvation mode. They took a biopsy. 2 months later, the biopsy somehow got lost. So we had to do it all over again. And so when he was 4 months old, the results came back that he was totally fine. And so they told us that sometimes this just happens with newborns. They have elevated liver enzymes and we never figure out why. Looking back now, we know that on the Hep B excerpt, that is one of the contraindications of it. So if we would have looked at that then, obviously we could have stopped it then. So he showed reaction then, but he was totally fine. Recovered, got all.
Sorry, so they recommended you continue to vaccinate him, even though he's had that reaction?
Yes, yeah. They did not put the correlation at all with the two. They never even looked at the vaccine as being the cause of the elevated liver enzymes.
All right, so you followed the schedule as the CDC recommended at the time?
Yes. And so then at 15 months, he got all the normal 15-month ones. I know he got 4 vaccines one day, and then we had to go back a week later because they didn't have the DTaP, and we got the DTaP. He got flu and then all your normal 15-month ones. Went back a week later, got the DTaP, and then that weekend, he slept for all day. He slept all day and ran a high fever. And then the whole next week, he started dragging one leg. So he was completely normal before this. No issues, feeding himself, doing all the things that 15-month-olds do. And within a week, he was dragging his right leg, we noticed. So we thought maybe he was just hurt. He had fallen playing or something. And the next week, we woke up on a Monday and he couldn't sit up anymore. We went into our doctor. She got us into geneticist the next day, Tuesday. By Tuesday, he could still get on all fours, but he could not crawl or anything. And like I said, he couldn't sit up. By Thursday, he couldn't move. So it started at his feet up. So he could still sort of move his hands and feed himself a little bit by that 4th day, but his lower extremities were completely straight and rigid. He couldn't move them. And so that's the first night we spent in the hospital. And they started doing all kinds of genetic testing. Luckily we had an awesome neurologist that went down a huge rabbit hole, would spend all night doing all the research. They did all the things. So he thought to do a spinal tap, looking for another DRD, looking for a completely different disorder. The spinal tap came back with extremely elevated interferonopathy. So his tetrahydrobiopterin and his zeopterin were higher than the labs had ever read before, they said. Those were the only labs that were off that they could find. And the only 2 things at the time that medical literature said that you have those symptoms were HIV and then a very rare genetic disorder called Aicardi-Gutierrez syndrome, AGS. So they ruled out HIV, obviously, with one test quickly. And we started doing all kinds of trials. He was trying different stuff while we did the $7,000 genetic panel, waiting on that. He ended up getting his first surgery a month later. They were hoping a tethered cord release, a spinal surgery would fix it. They were hoping it was just tight lower extremities by that point. Obviously, that did not fix it. By this time, he had lost all mobility of everything. So he was as he is now, and he's a quadriplegic. He cannot walk, talk, eat, any of those. He can communicate with his eyes, and he has pretty good head control. He looks like he has CP. Everybody thinks he has cerebral palsy now, but he does not. His brain is pretty normal from what any scans have shown. It is just simply his central nervous system is so impeded that he can't move at all. So he's basically trapped in his own body. And so I think we had 2 more surgeries. We had to do the feeding tube. So we had 4 surgeries that first year. And during this time, we started doing our own investigation, and we learned that it was probably a vaccine injury pretty quickly within a month or 2. The doctors did not believe it. We went back to Cook's like 4 months later, and we were reassigned. That neurologist had been fired, and we were reassigned the head of the department at Cook's, and he did not believe in vaccine injury at the time. And so we weren't getting much there, but he was talking to doctors all over the world trying to figure out. They swore, of course, that something was wrong with Heathe genetically. So they were doing all the testing that any doctor that he could ever get his hands, talking to, could think of that it was. So we allowed them to do all of that testing. Meanwhile, genetic testing came back completely normal. And we started we started working then with doctors in 4 different countries. We went to Boston, the White Matter Clinic in DC. We have a doctor in France that still followed him, doing research on him all this time, trying to find something. We went to Tijuana. We've been to Panama 3 times for stem cell. They tried IVIG treatment, so they did a Metaport. So we just started frantically for the next 3 years doing anything to reverse it, as the doctors were trying to figure out what it was. We moved to Colorado for a semester, trying trial treatments of Charlotte's Web up there. So we went to Denver Children's Hospital. They had no idea. They're the first doctor that validated that they thought vaccine injury probably was the cause of it. She still believed that it was a genetic disorder. And then I think 4 years in, we went back to our neurologist at Cook's, and he saw him, and he had kind of come out of this fog. And so that's the first time he believed it was a vaccine injury, and sort of stopped looking for another cause after 4 years, after we had exhausted everything. In this time, he basically cried all the time. I would say 75% of the time. He still is pretty miserable. They think he was just he has so much inflammation now that hasn't been able to calm down. His immune system was just so overreactive that he probably has massive migraines, all the things. So I don't know. What do you want me to?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just looking at those pictures, to be honest. It is, they've taken everything from him.
Yes.
I mean, he's such a beautiful little boy, and they've just, he can't talk, he can't move, he can't do anything. And yet you think his brain's working. That must be just 24/7 torture.
Yeah.
It is. That's the worst part. Not even having a handicapped child, any of that, but the crying and him being so miserable all the time. The trauma it's caused our other 2 children. That's the perfect word, is torture.
And you're saying he cries still now the whole time, right?
Yes, he got better. I would say, so we only took pictures when he would be smiling. It was a rare occasion. So, people on Facebook and stuff will be like, he's so happy all the time. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to post pictures that aren't happy of him. So I'm not saying we don't have smiling moments. But he really cried the first 5 years, or 3 to 5 years. He kind of came out of a fog. I would say some of the effects wore off after 3 years. And so he was more clear-headed. His eyes were more clear, and he did stop crying all the time. He literally cried all the time those first 3 to 5 years. And so he doesn't cry as much, and he goes through periods where he's a little happier than others. But yes, he lives a pretty miserable existence. That's the hardest thing about it.
Yeah, and well, so he's being daddy. I mean, it just must have just been heartbreaking for you.
Yes. I mean, it's pretty sad to watch him.
Yeah, that it was preventable, and you guys have proved that. Thank God, on behalf of us all, these vaccines, kill and injure beyond belief our children. Could you please tell us how you got through your 12 years you've been fighting this and how you won?
So my mom, we just started, all of our family just started doing all the research they could when he was first injured. And my mom came upon the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, luckily. And that was in February of 2014. So exactly 12 years ago, we had our first meeting. She found the closest, as they have to be on the attorneys have to be on an approved list. And Meg happened to be on that list. She was actually an oil and gas attorney in Fort Worth at the time. So we went and met with her in February of 2014. She, at the very beginning of her career, she had to take one vaccine case, and that is how she got put on this list. So since then, she had been oil and gas. She happened to have a child about the same age as Heathe. And so she just really had compassion for our case. And so she agreed to take it on. Thank God. She has been amazing. So she started fighting for us then. I think we actually applied in 2015. I know when we started the process in 2014, and that's when we signed all the paperwork, that we wouldn't sue the pharmaceutical companies and all the stuff you have to do to apply for the program. We got the special masters. Those are the judges in DC that take these cases. Somehow we were assigned 3 different ones over the next 6 years. And so we didn't get to go to court for our hearing until 2020. So we finally, in January of 2020, went to court. It was supposed to be a 2-day trial. And of course, I'm skipping all those 6 years of information gathering and all the things you have to do then.
Yeah.
We had our pediatrician write a letter saying she believed it was vaccine injury. And we had the neurologist who had never testified before and never believed in vaccine injury before Heathe. He came and testified for us. And that was in January of 2020. By then, we had so much genetic testing. We had the $7,000 basic panel at Cook's. And then the White Matter Clinic in DC had, the way they explained it is, that's like chapters of a book, and they did pages or words of a book. So they dissected his genetics and Heath and my genetics and found nothing. And so in this, we had 6 years of testing of all kinds, literally doctors all over the world. Nobody could find anything else. They had ruled out HIV and AGS. And so we were going in saying, the prongs, you just have to prove that the vaccine could be a cause. You don't have to prove that it was the cause. So we had 2 doctors. We had everything else had been ruled out at the time, any medical literature, anything they knew. And the special master, we had 1 day of trial and all the doctors testified. I was on there for 3 hours. They had an immunologist that he was very proud I think that was his 31st or 30 something case testifying against families. And then they had found the guru for AGS in the United States that treats the majority of the people with Aicardi-Gutierrez syndrome to come and testify. By the end of that first day, she had admitted that she would not diagnose him with AGS. He did not have anything besides that one spinal tap level. He had nothing else that would qualify. So if he was her patient, she would not diagnose him with AGS. And so there were no other things on the table that it could have been besides a vaccine injury. So the special master called it quits after 1 day and told our attorney something along the lines of, I want to give this to y'all. You've proven everything. There's no other option, but I need more science of it. I need more detail. Your neurologist did not go into enough scientific detail. So find me that. So from January 2020, we spent the next, I think, were we denied in 21 or 22?
22.
So we spent the next 2 years. We found a doctor this was all during COVID, obviously. We found a doctor out of Stanford that had been on vaccine panels, and he had also done vaccine research. And he kept denying us, but I finally talked him into taking our case on. And he wrote an 18-page paper detailing the science of how the vaccines actually affected Heathe. And so we turned in this 18-page paper. And we still were denied in 2022 with the special master saying we just didn't meet the loving prongs. Not much detail. There was nothing else we could do. I mean, we had doctors testify for us. We had their side that had admitted there was nothing else they could think of that it could be. And so we appealed, and another special master wrote a paper saying that he thinks that she looked at it wrong and that she needed to look at it again. So he sent it back to her, and she finally then approved it. So we were approved in 2023. And so then for people that don't know, you have to hire a life care planner, and the government hires a life care planner, and they have to come together on an agreement on a plan of how much they think that it's going to cost Heathe's life for the rest of his life, how much per year. And they put together that report. So that has all that was in 2023. We closed in October of 2025, and we finally got funding in the trust a month ago.
Yeah, 26.
So in 2026, we finally got funding for the first year. We had to turn in out-of-pocket expenses, all of that stuff. We got 10% back of our out-of-pocket expenses that we turned in because it had been so much time lapse. They came back and said they wanted bank statements, and the banks don't keep anything from past 7 years. And we had not kept all the bank statements. I had kept detailed spreadsheets that matched every single time we were hospitalized and all the things that came with it. And those matched the medical records, but they came, just in 2024 told us that wasn't sufficient. We needed bank records. And since we couldn't access those, we lost 90% of out-of-pocket expenses that we've spent over the last 12 years.
My goodness.
This was the first few years.
5 years.
All the travel and all the stuff.
So, but still, I mean, okay, they're giving you money for the rest of his life. It still doesn't take away what they've done to him. And I mean, it's very hard to listen to this story because I think everybody in the chat must be just feeling for you, of course, but also poor Heath. I just can't get over that his life is like that now because of a vaccine. Which vaccine or vaccines did they say were responsible for his injury?
They gave the responsibility in the courts, I think, to the DTaP, the Pentacell vaccine at 15 months. They say that has the most research. So that's the one that they said. And, we've met with so many doctors and gotten their theories, and who knows if it was that one vaccine or if it was all the vaccines. Who knows if it was the preservatives in them that clung to the central nervous system. That's what those preservatives do. And in his case, that happens to be what's impeded. Or if it shot his immune system into overdrive and he wasn't able to recover. And, we try not to dwell, like you're saying. It's the most sickening feeling. I can't explain what it's like as a parent, and people that meet us now, they don't have any idea how perfect and wonderful and normal he was before that. And so we are on scientific rational mode right now. This is obviously not how we are all the time. Yeah. It is very hard to grasp to look at your child and see him suffering all of the time, knowing that this one choice basically took his entire life away, and not only took his life away, but caused him to suffer for prognosis is no telling how many years. So he's just suffering all day, every day now, basically.
I'm so sorry, both of you. It's just very upsetting. You went on to have 2 more children. Now, did those children get vaccinated?
So they did not. We were trying for a child when his vaccine injury occurred. So we were already pregnant.
We didn't know we were.
We did not know we were pregnant. And so that was a scary time, obviously, because at that point we didn't know if it was genetics or anything. And then by the time that child was obviously old enough to then have another child, it was an agreement, doctors and everybody, that this was strictly a vaccine injury. And so the doctors, they said not to vaccinate our other 2 children for the first 2 years. We obviously decided not to vaccinate them at all. And so they have had 0 vaccines, and they haven't been to a doctor in I don't know how long. They're very healthy.
They don't get sick. They're perfectly healthy.
Or if they do get sick, they recover in a couple of days,
And do they have autism or seizures or paralysis or anything like that that apparently are just completely normal and nothing with vaccines? Do they have those?
Right. No, they're perfectly healthy and normal.
Right. So this story really is a true vaxxed, unvaxxed home study. What you've been through, but Heathe is the one that took one for the team for us to wake us all up of what's happened. And again, I can't get what happened to him out, or what can we do for Heathe? I don't know. What can we do? We pray for Heathe, everybody.
You know, and it's his poor brothers. I mean, I didn't realize how hard it would be for them either, obviously. You know, Hyatt, the 11-year-old, the first 3 years of his life was just constant crying. And I can't imagine how stressed we were. You know, I didn't probably tried to hide it and everything then, but
What
Yeah.
they went through,
Yeah,
what they've had to listen to, and what they've had to deal with.
it affects the whole family, obviously, you know, greatly.
It does. It does. Siblings are the untold story. Well, that's for another day. But I just want to say to you guys, thank you for telling us this. What is your advice to the young parents out there? And when you see the propaganda always about measles, about there's death and whooping cough and death and vaccinate, safe and effective, what do you say to those young parents having been through what you've been through?
So I don't like to tell anybody what to do. So I've never been an advocate shaming people for any of their choices. But I will say, everyone asks me, they're like, what's the one vaccine? They just hope that they can say, oh, well, Heathe is, you know, this one vaccine, so we just won't do that one vaccine. Unfortunately, the ones that the doctors are pushing the most are the ones that seem to do the most damage. So the MMR, the DTaP, the ones that a lot of the doctors are not willing to do away with, are the ones that are the most offensive to the children, you know. And so I would just say they need to be strong and they need to do their own research, and they don't need to be bullied into anything. You know, this is their child and they're the ones that have to live with them forever.
All right. Well, thank you both for being on this morning. And again, a very, very difficult story to listen to. I'm so pleased that you've got something for Heathe's life. And if there's anything that we can do at Children's Health Defence, please contact us, because I know a lot of people listening are going to be very affected by this story. But big love to you both, and thank you so much for being here. And sadly, you're just one of millions, like my son and a great many other people watching here now, that we did vaccinate, we did trust the system, and our children are either dead or is severely injured for life. So there's that. But really, thank you so much for telling this very important story.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
All right, everyone, we're going to go straight now to doctors and scientists with Brian Hooker.
Good morning, CHD. It is Brian Hooker, and it's Friday, so it's time for doctors and scientists. I am in my new digs, my new office. It's still, you know, it has new office smell, which I absolutely love. I know that the formaldehyde fumes are probably doing something to my body. You always think about cancer with stuff like this, and I'm not predicting, you know, my ultimate demise or anything like that, but formaldehyde, just that smell, you know, it makes me think, oh, I got to detox. But we've got such a treat for you today. Speaking of journeys regarding cancer, and speaking about books that you absolutely positively just have to get on and pre-order right now. The book is called The Outsider. The author right here, the wonderful, illustrious Dr. David Rasnick. Thank you for coming on the show. I so appreciate it. You were actually recommended to me, and I you know, I thought it was a mistake. But I'm so glad it wasn't a mistake. Welcome to the show, and thank you for this wonderful work. I've really enjoyed reading your book.
Well, Brian, it's a pleasure to be with you, and Happy New Year, and everybody at CHD. Love you guys.
The slice of the population that doesn't know you but should. Let's start with your journey. I love that you started chapter 1, you know, right before the Vietnam War. Is that correct? But give us a capsule view of, you know, who you are and how your journey led up to writing this book.
Okay, a really quickie, because it's a long story. I wanted to be an astronaut, went to Vietnam, because my eyes weren't good enough, couldn't be an astronaut. Came back from Vietnam in the late 70s, went back to Georgia Tech, decided to get degrees in biology and chemistry, and I got a PhD in chemistry. Worked in the pharmaceutical industry, biotech for about 20 years, had my own companies for about 15 years or so, and moved to the San Francisco Bay Area in 1980. That's where I met a lot of the folks at university, UC Berkeley. Peter Duesberg was over there. And then AIDS, of course, started in the 1980s. Right. And that's where my journey began. And I went from there, and it hasn't stopped yet to this day.
You were actually able to work with Peter Duesberg, Dr. Peter Duesberg. You know, sadly, he just very recently passed away, and, you know, such a hero of mine. And he was, you know, he was very controversial in terms of the, disputing the HIV theory of AIDS. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is so true. I was a visiting scholar at UC Berkeley there for a while. And Peter discovered the first cancer virus, so-called cancer virus, these retroviruses, and a number of them. And they didn't really cause cancer in any animals except animals that had no immune system. Mm-hmm. And started doubting the gene mutation thing in the probably in the late 70s, certainly in the mid 80s, and that made him a little bit of anathema, because he started wanting to approach the unbalanced chromosome, right, and he was going against the gene mutation stuff at the time. And of course, the pharmaceutical companies absolutely despise that, because that's where they were at. The AIDS thing, of course, he disputed that with Robert Gallo, his retrovirus, the HTLV3 that eventually was changed to HIV. And Peter, it was 1987, invited article in Cancer Research, where it was like a legal document, point for point for point, how retroviruses in general could not cause disease, and HIV in particular. And of course, that made him sort of the guy to shut up, because he was the world authority on those things.
Incredible. And, you know, the thing is that Dr. Duesberg was marginalized, was, you know, basically lost his grant money, lost his funding. But he still stood. I mean, to me, you know, being an anathema started when my son got his autism diagnosis after regressing after 3 vaccines and Tylenol exposure. And that gives me hope. I mean, that gives me a lot of hope. Let's jump in with that. The gene mutation theory of cancer versus what you've written about in The Outsider Advantage.
Very important thing in my personal life, and I think even in the whole field of cancer, happened in 1996, when basically Peter and I joined up together. And at the coffee shop just across from the campus, when a week or so before he was going to Germany to do a sabbatical, and he was going to work on chromosomes and things there, about the chromosomal imbalance theory of cancer.
Right.
We were talking about it at this coffee shop. And here I was, a guy who'd been working with individual enzymes, making enzymes and enzyme inhibitors, hundreds of them for the, you know, different proteases and things.
Right.
And one at a time. And then I remember after this conversation, you know, talking about these chromosomes, and I asked Peter, you mean it's just numbers? In other words, not a specific cause, like an individual one that you can call by name? And he said yes, which meant that it was the numbers of constituents that are out of balance that was causing cancer. And then Peter left, went to Germany on that sabbatical, and I stayed and learned about the chromosomal imbalance, went to the library. UC Berkeley had marvelous libraries. And then I studied the history of all that stuff, and I put it in the book, by the way, I hope in an interesting way, without boring people, about how the progress of that over decades, going all the way back to Theodore Boveri in 1914. He wrote this marvelous little book. He died the next year at 1915, where he laid it out, and he got it right. He got it absolutely right.
Right.
that cancer is caused by an imbalance in these chromosomes, and they're changing all the time, and no two cancer cells are identical. I've got that book available. Person could even download it from my website it's a short little book that he published in 1914. And unfortunately, Boveri died in 1915, and of course that was World War I, and there's World War II and all that. So it never took off. And then, of course, in the 1950s, they basically, chromosomes are all hat, but genes, with the identification of DNA, which became early 1950s, that was all the hot stuff right there. And that took off, and that's what's been dominating, I guess, biomolecular research and pharmaceuticals to this day. And it's basically wrong.
I wish I could disagree with you. My knowledge around cancer is definitely a steep learning curve and evolving. But I do know that aneuploidy is, that's one of the most frustrating thing about characterizing tumors, is because every cell is different. Every cell is absolutely different. So explain, to the layperson, what is aneuploidy, and then how does aneuploidy then come about to cause cancer?
Well, normal human cell, the father provides 23 chromosomes, unique chromosomes. The mother provides 23 chromosomes. Right. All right. For a balanced set of 46. So it's balanced chromosomes. In all mammals, we all have balanced chromosomes. And they're extremely stable, extremely stable. We have like 20 to 40 trillion cells in our body that undergo like 40 trillion cell divisions in a lifetime, And there are very, very few mutations, and none of those mutations cause cancer. And they stay balanced your whole life. Now, an imbalance, the simplest imbalance in chromosomes that most people have experienced are like Down syndrome. Down syndromes are children that are born with 3 copies of chromosome 21, the smallest chromosome. And now, fortunately, Down syndrome people can live up to about 60 years old now, which is not as high as people who have balanced chromosomes, but they have extraordinarily high risk of cancers, non-cigarette related cancers. A lot of people, they say, oh, look at Down syndrome. They don't get the mouth cancer, the lung cancer, and the things that cigarette smokers get. So they're it can't be that. But they have high rates of cancer in many other different tissues, up to 500-fold higher. And and that's because it's a small imbalance, chromosome 21.
Right.
A typical cancer cell has about 70 chromosomes, 50 to 80, 50 to 90, somewhere in there, chromosomes, but typically around 70, with a wide spread. And probably no two cancer cells in history have the identical combination of chromosomes. They break apart. They fuse together, whatever, and they almost always die. One of the things that people don't understand is that it takes a long time for a person to get cancer. Right. You get these natural aneuploidies from like a carcinogen. Those cells that have aneuploid, they typically don't survive. They die. If they do survive, typically you have to get more and more carcinogens to build up a population of these things enough so that you can have enough to survive. But even in a lethal cancer, billions of these cells in a large tumor are dying on their own without any therapy or anything. It's just they've reached a population that they can divide enough to keep going. The thing is that a normal, healthy person that has a tumor, there's a huge health advantage without any drugs over that person over this cancer that's barely surviving in that person. One of the big mistakes, absolutely the horrendous mistake, is treating people with cancers with poisons, toxic things like radiation, chemotherapy. These are carcinogenic to begin with. Mm-hmm. And it depresses your own health. You're reducing your advantage over that tumor. The tumors, because they're so wimpy, they die really, really fast, a lot faster than the normal cells with these therapies. It gives the illusion that the therapies are working. But you have to take the person off of these toxic therapies before you kill them with the therapy. But now that person is very unhealthy. And the tumor cells now come back with a vengeance. And there's no therapy that can stop that tumor from that point on, and you've lost your advantage. So nobody should ever get chemotherapy or radiation for cancer. It won't do you any good.
That's so counter what mainstream medicine says and what it does. What about, I want to play Lucifer's advocate, okay, devil's advocate. What about those people that recover from chemo or radiation and are in quote unquote remission? What would you say to that? Is there, there's got to be some type of increased sensitivity of these aneuploidal cells to these therapies, or what's going on there?
It's like a dice game. It's like
Really?
a lot. You have these bell-shaped curves or whatever, regardless of the situation.
Right.
And there'll always be outsiders. People are extremely sensitive, and people that will survive whatever the situation is in cancer. But when you look at the overall mortality of these folks, there's been no improvement of lifespan of people who've been treated with these therapies over the decades. There is none. In fact, they're dying quicker than they used to. And they use their yardstick is like 5-year survival, because people can survive that point. They don't tell you much about what happens to them afterward or how healthy they are. But my book goes in there and gives the particulars, the specific data on these things. And the Coley toxin thing, which I discuss in the book too. William Coley, back in the early 20th century, found out that some of these cancer patients that had lethal cancer, they got these high spiking fevers during the therapy or whatever, really, really high fevers, and their tumors went away in days. If you can believe that, it went away in days, and these people survived. And he developed in his laboratory what people call Coley toxins, and then they call them mixed bacterial toxins, where like Mexico and Europe and other places, they use this without these other toxic drugs. In the United States, they only use Coley's toxin type therapy in combination with chemotherapy and radiation, you see. And it doesn't, it's just not really visible in the United States, but it really, really works. And it has much higher survival rate. Coley's daughter actually went around the world and collected the data on this method around the world, wrote a book about it. And the data that she published in that book is still astounding, about the percentages, like you could get 50% survival instead of 5% survival using Coley. Yeah. So, and I got that in the books.
So when you look at cell division gone wrong, the cell divides, it goes from its resting state, and now it's actively dividing. It's in mitosis and cytokinesis. Can you break down mechanistically, how this comes about, and what's going to elicit it, in terms of genetic predisposition, in terms of environmental stressors and things like that? Is it straightforward, or is it just sort of myriad toxins, or let's talk about that.
Yeah, okay. First of all, there's absolutely no evidence whatever in the scientific medical literature, and many of the mainstream leading oncologists or cancer researchers know it, and I even quote them a lot in the book, that the gene mutation thing is not working. There are no genetic links to cancer other than aneuploidy.
Right. Absolutely. But something's causing aneuploidy.
Yeah, carcinogen.
Something's causing this aneuploidy to go over the edge. There's aneuploidy going on in my body right now, but it's not over the edge. It's not, there is not a critical mass, correct?
Yeah, no, it's basically a lottery. If you buy a billion lottery tickets, you really, really increase your chances of winning. You know? And it has to, like with humans, for example, we humans and mice, 99% of our genes are identical, and most of them, the sequence order in the sequencers is the same.
Right.
Humans live to be, 70, 80 years old. Mice 2 to 3 years. We have the exact same genes, they're in the exact same order. There's a huge, huge difference in the susceptibility of cancer between the mice and the humans, and genes have nothing to do with it. The mouse's genes, you might consider them chromosomes. Consider them like checkers. All the checkers are alike, and the human chromosomes have different lengths. Their little centromeres are located in different places along the chromosome. Our chromosomes are like chess pieces compared to the mouse's checkers. All right. And so the ability to orient our chromosomes in our cells, where they're all lined up in a particular order to balance the forces when the cells divide and pull the chromosomes apart, it's like a combination lock. Our combination lock is much bigger and harder to break in order for that cell to survive and to divide. The mouse's combination of getting its 20, it has 20 chromosomes where we have 23 individual ones, different ones, distinct ones.
Right.
They have 40, we have 46. But theirs are so much easier to keep in balance, even if they're not oriented properly. And they can become aneuploid much quicker. And that's why they get their cancers, like in cell culture. You can grow mouse cells in culture, and they will spontaneously transform in culture. Well, human cells will not, just because of that lottery, about having the chromosomes separate evenly. The humans are very, very secure when they do not spontaneously transform in culture, they die. But the mouse cells, I think 1 out of 3 or whatever, they will transform in cell culture.
It's unique to our chromosome structure,
Yes.
rather than doing the deep dive lotto into single nucleotide polymorphisms or mutations or whatever. So,
but I'll give you another example. The Galapagos tortoise, which lives 175 to 250 years, it has many more chromosomes than we do, and it's like a three-dimensional chess game. There's only been, I think, 1 or 2 cancers recorded in the Galapagos tortoises as of, I looked just months ago to update it. Hasn't changed. And the only thing difference is they have so many more chromosomes than we do.
Things that you just don't learn. I mean, this is not in cell biology. It's not in molecular biology, and I think of the hubris in terms of the sequencing of the human genome and so forth, that somehow we were going to unlock all of this on a mutational basis. I love the fact that you've discovered it and you found it. It just needs to be more widespread. You have a section in your book about tumors being generally slow growing, but what about the difference between a regular tumor and then what's being termed turbo cancer now?
Oh yes, the turbo cancer, in fact, was these injections, these COVID injections, things started popping up, and I heard about it online. I never heard of this before in my life. About this phenomenon, and it was like a lot of other people to hear this word turbo cancer. It's not a technical thing, but I went and looked in the literature, and it's also called, technically, it's called hyper-progressive disease. The earliest publication I could find on that was 2017. And there's last time I looked, 286 papers published on hyper-progressive disease. Now, hyper-progressive disease is basically turbo cancer. And it appears in people who already had cancer. They were being given chemotherapy, new types of chemotherapy for the cancer. These things are called immune checkpoint inhibitors. And this was back in the mid-2020s. And then they started seeing these people that would get really quickly, they would get like stage 3, stage 4 cancers, and they would die like days to weeks to months. And these people that already had cancer, so they already had the cancer there, but it accelerated the ability of those cancers to kill them. And they're still publishing on that, and I keep looking to see, and I have not yet found a paper who's trying to understand it. They just sort of keep documenting that they're experiencing more and more of these people in this hospital or that hospital or whatever, And other people have been looking at this since the COVID things, and they're looking at that same immune checkpoint stuff, and especially these immunoglobulins called IgG4. These immunoglobulins that work like a gas pedal, and the other one works like a brake. And the gas pedal is to help you fight off something that you got really quickly, and the brake is to stop it so you don't hurt the host, And IgG4, for example, allows people to get over allergens. For example, I used to be allergic to poison ivy. Not anymore, because I've been exposed to it so often when I was a child. You get used to it, and you tolerate it. It's also what they use to bring these things out if for organ transplants, so that you won't reject the organ so quickly. Well, unfortunately, you have your body. Now, your body, that you go from like 0.05, I forget what it is, level of IgG4 in your body up to 500. You know, after you start taking these injections, you know, so you got the break, and you're shutting down your innate immune system that protects you against cancer. And basically, you're turning a human being into a petri dish, you know, where aneuploid cells now can proliferate in a petri dish.
So it's the hyperproliferation of IgG4, which has been shown. COVID injections, shots have been shown to more preferentially elicit IgG4 and the suppression of the innate immune system both. I mean, so are we basically pushing on the gas pedal and then we're pulling off the brake at the same time?
You're shutting down your immune system, basically.
Right.
IgG4 is a powerful, powerful brake. And that's an overwhelming abundance in a lot of these people that got those injections.
Talk more about your personal story. All of a sudden in 1996, you're teaming with a person that, you know, is kind of persona non grata.
It's in my book. It's a long story, and it's continuing to this day. Basically, the things that happen to I've come to I have finally starting to rationalize this.
Right.
Everything that happens to you in life is a blessing. Even those things on the surface or immediately seem like a horrible tragedy or whatever, you know. And fortunately, I don't know what it was in me, but as a young person, when bad things happened to me, I didn't get worked up about it. I cannot explain that. And I've had a lot of my companies torpedoed after I joined up with Peter Duesberg, my little biotech companies, starting to go, you know, make a lot of progress, and all of a sudden overnight they're just torpedoed and they disappear. This happened. It's in my book. I talk about it a lot. It's like with Peter, he got his grant money shut down.
Right.
Various other things that we're doing, working on the AIDS stuff. There's all these attacks from all different directions. And the thing was, you know, all right, that stopped that down, you know. Right. And then I would be with Peter, and then I'm working on this, you know, with the AIDS, so then I work with him. And then we prove Theodore Boveri's chromosomal imbalance theory as a consequence. It never would have happened had it not been for AIDS, you know, and Peter gotten shut down, you know. And my other companies that would get shut down, but something else wonderful, new connections would form, you know, and like even this horrible thing with this COVID stuff and all that. You and I would have never known each other or heard of each other, and all the other wonderful people that we're getting to connect with as a result of these horrors of COVID. Never would have happened. But it has this good component, which is so, it's a blessing when you think about it. You know, and I could go on and on and on about this because I've been thinking about all these decades of my life that's been like that. And it sort of prepared me every step of my life along the way to be, okay, now there's this new blessing coming, right, you know, as an unexpected consequence.
I really appreciate your attitude about that. I mean, these things that happen. I mean, having a biotech company fail or whatever. I was a owner of a small biotech for 2 whole years, and then because of an accounting error with one of our major, we were a contract CRO. One of our contracts then just disappeared all of a sudden, and we did have to close our doors because we were so small. We were relying on very limited number of contracts. Seeing stuff like that as a blessing, I think, is so important. I mean, your attitude is so refreshing, and I think that also says something about the staying power of people like you, people like Peter, that were able to continue on.
Peter had one of the best senses of humor of anybody I've ever met in my life. And I think I do too. I mean, I love to laugh. It's not that I'm funny, but Peter was funny, and we laugh a lot. And all the other people that seem to, that I've been associated with, we laugh a lot. and I can't, that's one of the common denominator that I've noticed over the decades.
Right. Now, there is a shift in terms of, how cancers are being dealt with therapeutically. Where does this get fixed? I mean, if we're looking at immunotherapies to approach cancer, does that address aneuploidy, or are we just missing the mark?
No. It's like, how do we fix our country and our government? Frankly, I think none of it's fixable right now.
Okay.
Everything is sort of just falling apart and decaying, but it can be rebuilt. That's what we have to look forward to. Like we're rebuilding the media, like
Right.
what CHD, Catherine Austin Fitz, all these other folks, we're rebuilding the sources of information, and that we're getting. So basically, it's not fixing it. It's rebuilding so that when we're going to build something, maybe not rebuild it, but build anew.
Build new, right.
That's where we're going. I hope so anyway.
Right. Yeah. And build anew, in terms of this, from your perspective and from looking seriously regarding aneuploidy, do you see therapeutics coming out that are addressing this, or is that going to have to be rebuilt too?
That's been around for a long, long time.
Okay.
Fever is one of the most potent anti-cancer things around. High spiking fever, because these aneuploid cells, even the lethal cancers, I mean, the very deadly invasive cancers, they're not anywhere nearly as healthy as your normal cells. They cannot tolerate a very much of elevation in temperature. And so, like I say, the Coley toxin stuff, which is being used in Europe and Mexico and other places, and only in the United States if you take it with chemo or radiation,
Right.
And then there's other diet, the keto diets. The keto diets are very, very important because cancer has an absolute requirement for glucose. You starve cancer cells of glucose, the cancer cells just die, And so, I mean, there's ways to do it. The important thing is we know the approaches. We have to pursue them more and learn from the past, and then develop them, especially with if we put more people on it with good brains and things, and say, oh yeah, here's another way we could do this, So we've got the way to start, and it's non-toxic.
Good news. Very, very good news. Well, Dave, Dr. Rasnick, thank you so much for joining us today. The book comes out on February 26th. Is that correct?
February 26th.
Everybody needs to read this book. This is such an important book. Dr. Rasnick, thank you again. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. This important episode of Doctors and Scientists, The Outsider Advantage. Go buy the book, tell people about the episode, and you have a great Friday.
Can you tell everyone your name, please?
Renee Fricky.
And this, you want to tell a few little different stories. That's why we called it this. So who do you want to start with?
So I really want to talk about just sort of the whole devastation of COVID, really from beginning to the end. And I have a number of horrible stories that happened to me personally and my husband, who passed away during that time, and culminating in the death of my father after the COVID vaccine. So I actually had COVID. I actually had COVID very early, and many of us in California actually had it in January of 2020, which was before any of the lockdowns, any of that. We had heard that there was some, sort of flu-like thing happening over in China. We had it. We had gotten over it, and and we did actually have a couple of friends who early on, back in December of 2019, actually, their whole family had it also in California. And I had a friend who had a grandmother who had passed away from COVID. But at this point, we had pretty much all had it in my family in California. And so when the lockdowns came, we were not really all that scared, and we masked up when we could and all that kind of stuff. But there wasn't a lot of fear in my family. My husband at that point was in remission for prostate cancer. So he had been fighting prostate cancer for about 3 years. Had the surgery, had chemo, had hormone therapy, all of that, and was managing it very well, was in remission and was healthy. The COVID lockdowns came, and suddenly all of his activity had to stop, so he was he had started out, he had been playing pickleball for about 5 hours a day, so very, very active. And then suddenly they shut everything down. Here in San Diego, you couldn't even go to the beach, you couldn't be outside, you couldn't walk anywhere. So he suddenly, found himself stuck inside, and it had devastating effect on his health. So we didn't get to even have any sort of outdoor activities until very late here in California. So I think it was beginning of maybe late June, early July. So he had actually started, sort of playing pickleball again. July 1st, he comes to me, he says, it's probably because I haven't played for so many months and I've been stuck inside, but my back is starting to hurt. And I don't really feel quite right. So we took it at, it's just a strain. By the end of the month, he could barely walk. He was almost paralyzed. We took him to the emergency room on the morning that he could not help himself out of bed. And got to the hospital and literally had people screaming, because you weren't allowed to go into the hospital at all at that point. Literally had people screaming at me, "Stay in your car, do not get out of your car." I told them, I said, my husband can't walk at this point. I have to help him. Yelling at me, screaming at me. And they took him into the hospital. And then I was terrified. Then I was like, I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I don't know, and because I was not allowed into the hospital.
And he had not had the vaccination.
He had not had the vaccination, no. So he goes into the hospital. They take him in. They run some tests. Later that day, I get a call from him with devastating news. His cancer is back, and it has gotten into his spine, and it is spreading like wildfire. The hospital said, "We can't do anything for you. Here is 10 days worth of morphine. Go home and die." Yeah. So he comes home, we get him home. I call my son, who's up in Washington State, and I call for him to come down and you have to help me with your dad. He comes down, we rally around him. Call his oncologist. Oncologist says, "Oh, I can't see, we're not taking any appointments. We are, I can't even give you a tele-appointment until 2 weeks from now." So we're in a panic, absolute panic. There's nobody who is helping. And my husband almost passed away. There was one night where we had all said goodbye to him because he was so close. He was so close to dying.
Was he in pain? Did you have enough pain medication?
He was in pain. They did give us morphine. They basically told him, go home, take morphine, die.
Did you know how to give morphine?
Huh?
Did you know how to give the morphine? Are medical professionals supposed to do that?
No, they gave us pills, morphine pills.
Pills.
Yeah. So, at this point, I'm done. I'm done with the whole medical system. And I had worked. I was a fundraiser. I was one of the leading fundraisers for big research universities and hospital systems, academic medical centers. So I have. This is what I had devoted my life to. Anyway, at that point, I get a call from a friend of mine who's in the Netherlands, hears about my husband's condition, Shannon, and says, "Run out and get Panacure C right now. And I said, what is that? He said, it's fenbendazole. And he said, nobody is helping you. Just try it. It's a dog dewormer. It's sold by Merck. We ran out and got that. And literally within 2 days, he started making a turnaround. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. And I, at that moment, was number one in shock. But so grateful, so incredibly grateful. And so we were actually able to nurse him back to health. Not full health. He still had this damage in his spine from the cancer. But he was getting stronger again. And he was, and he had already sort of entered cachexia, which is that wasting that happens with cancer. We were able to turn that around with eggs, lots of eggs. And then unfortunately the hospital got a hold of him again. He had aspirated. Because he couldn't sit up, and so he was laying down and drinking out of a straw, and had aspirated a bunch of juice into his lungs. So we had to call the paramedics to help get all of that out of his lungs. And they, at that time, said, why don't we take him to the hospital, do a scope, make sure that we got it all. It sounded good to me. It's like, okay. They got him to the hospital, and number one, they were surprised he was still alive. And then they basically said, okay, well, we're going to do, and they put him on chemotherapy. They gave him a lifetime dose of radiation and put him back on hormone therapy, all within 6 days. I was still not allowed to go into the hospital, so I didn't know what that they were doing with him. He got out of when he finally got out of the hospital, when they delivered him home, because he couldn't walk at that point, he looked at me, he said, all the gains that we made on the fenbendazole are for nothing, because they just destroyed me. And he gave up at that point. And he passed away about a month later. At home, again, because, hospice, basically they gave me a bed and an oxygen tank and said, you're on your own, because we don't have any, because of COVID restrictions, we can't have anyone helping you. So that was December 2020. The vaccines started coming out in 2021. At that point, I'm done with doctors. I don't ever want to see another doctor again. I'm telling all of my family members, please do not get this vaccine. I was a fundraiser. I was a vice president of a hospital in Arizona for a while. So I know how hospitals work. I know how funding works. And I know my way around PubMed and how to read those studies. And I knew that there had never been a successful vaccine for coronavirus, and that they'd been trying to make one for about 20 years. Told my entire family back home in Chicago, please, please, please do not take it. Both my sister and my father, my sister's a couple years older than me, so in her early 60s, and my father, my sister took 2 doses of Moderna, my father 2 doses of Pfizer. They both broke out in rashes all over their body, horrible rashes, just open sores. And she was explaining it to me on the phone. She says, I have weepy legs. I said, that is not a medical term, so what is happening with your legs? And then she took a photo of what was happening, and it was just open sores all over her legs. And my father also had open sores all over his legs.
Did they then realise it was the vaccination?
She did. No. Okay. And my oldest sister just deny. It is not. My brother kept telling me, no, it's not it. I know that you think it is. Then my sister, who took the 2 shots of Moderna, She wound up having 3 separate surgeries for blood clots in her legs. My father, over the next few months, had surgeries for blood clots in his lungs and blood clots in his legs. And he wound up having a massive heart attack 6 months later.
Did he die?
Yes, he passed away. So I am horrified. I'm absolutely horrified in the things that have happened over the last 4 years. And I have to say, I'm still traumatized by it all.
Of course you are. That's all your loved ones in one go.
Thank you. So that's why I fight so hard. You know, I have volunteered a lot on, especially on these vaccine mandates, because I have a granddaughter here in California that I want her to grow up and be strong and healthy, smart girl. When the lockdowns first started happening, I remember she and I tried to go to Hobby Lobby. We were going to do some crafts. And of course, Hobby Lobby would not let anyone into their store. You had to order online. And she says to me, she says, "Grandma, how come we can't go to Hobby Lobby, but we can go to Walmart, which is right next door?" I said, "Yeah, that doesn't make sense, does it?" She says, "No, it does not." And she said, "Grandma, a lot of the stuff that they're doing does not make sense." So, smart girl, she was 9 years old at the time, figured it out. So,
Clever girl.
yeah.
Anything else you want to add to this?
No, that's it.
Thank you so much, though.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
thank you.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.